Right, this is a quick tutorial to illustrate how to make GIFs in Photoshop using the timeline. We're going to attempt to make something that looks a bit like this, which just has a bit of motion and a clicky button, all inside Photoshop. Okay, just get Photoshop open. New document. I'll do. Right, I'm going to fill the background layer with black, and then we're going to create some text, and we're going to create the text on individual layers because we want to do them something different with them each, so they all need to be different text layers. Just duplicate these by holding down Alt, using the Move tool. There we go. Right. Lovely. So there. That's centered. There. Okay. Then we'll just add some shapes. Got the shape layers. Various shapes. So we're just going to pop that on there. It's a sort of a logo shape. Double click on it to change the colour. And we need our button. Let's go here, duplicate that. Just have that say clicky. Then shape layer. There we go. That's going to be our button, so we want our button to be that colour. Double click on the shape layer to change the colour. Text we want as black. Okay, so those are the basic elements in place. Just move them around a bit, nice and tidy. I'm going to make sure they're all horizontal lines, so we select them all with the background. Oh, I didn't need to do that. Okay. Right, that's everything roughly in place. Okay, I'm going to save that. Now, in order to get these elements moving, you need to go and open the timeline. Just down here under Window. Now, this works in either frames or an actual timeline, similar to various animation packages. And what you need to do is just click, if you want to do it in individual frames, just click the drop down, create frame animation, and it'll pull up the first frame. We don't want to do that in this instance. We're going to use a timeline animation, which will make it easier to move stuff around on the screen and keyframe elements. So just click Create Video Timeline, and then that brings you all your items. So we're running at 30 frames a second. You can see that mark, so 15 frames, 1 second, 15 frames, 2 seconds, 15 frames, 3 seconds, and so on and so forth. So you can change the frame rate if you wish. You can change resolution. Frame rate is changed here. timeline frame rate. So if you wanted to change that to 15 or whatever, GIFs tend to play natively at about 15 frames, but you'll get something nice and smooth if you leave it at 30. Right, so the timeline will, as I say, let you keyframe elements for animations. So let's start at the beginning. Actually, what we didn't do is we haven't created a gradient. We're just going to create a gradient background layer. There we are, we've got that on a reflective one. Let's just make sure we know where the beginning is. Guides will, if you're on the background layer and it's locked, they will snap to the center, which is quite a useful thing to note. Go to our layer, and just create a gradient a bit like that. What we're going to do is we're going to animate that across the screen in a minute. Okay, let's start with that. So here our layers appear down there, and what we want to do is we want to move the position of that. Now, certain elements are only animatable. So in this instance, on a normal layer, you can only animate the position, the opacity, and the layer style. The layer style would be drop shadows, glows, and things like that. We'll have a quick look at that later if I remember. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to move this layer so it animates across the screen a bit like that. Okay, so turning off the background so we can see where the edge of the layer is. Let's just take that to where we want it to start, which is off screen. And we go down here and we click the little stopwatch symbol next to position, and that is our first keyframe. So for the whole of the animation, which probably, let's just leave it to 4 seconds for the time being. Okay, so we take it to the end of the animation, and we've got a layer, and we want to move that all the way across. And you see it's automatically created a keyframe there. So I'm just going to switch the background layer back on, and you'll now see that as we scrub through the timeline, that moves. Now, I think in the other one I had it at a slight angle, so what you can do is you can drag that out, and we can scale that. Let's just move it here so we can see what we're doing. Scale it vertically, and then we're going to rotate it by, I don't know, 30 degrees or something like that, just so it comes at an angle. And you'll see, so that just allows it a bit of an angle. And you can play your animation through by just hitting the play. So that's moving quite slowly, so we might want to speed that up and reduce the length of the animation, because that'll make the file size even larger. Again, we'll look at that when it comes to saving it later on. Okay, so let's reduce the length of our animation. Just take it down to 3 seconds. Just remember to move the keyframe along. Maybe take it down to 2, which is 60 frames, which is still fairly, yeah. You can see the playback speed down here, so some computers obviously won't have the power to run everything at real time, so but this is running at 30 frames a second now. Okay, so we've animated the background. Now what we want our logo to pop in. Now with shape layers, you only have a select amount of animation options. In order to animate the scale of something, have it zoom in and pop out, you need to convert it. You can animate obviously all these. Don't worry about these two for the time being. But what we need to do is, in order to get our ability to animate the scale and have it zoom in and bounce, like in our example, like that, we need to convert it. So we right click the layer, convert to smart object. Now you'll see that is listed there. But now we have a transform option available, which means we can scale, move, etc. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to set the transform. So we're going to click the stopwatch, transform, Control T, and we want to make sure we lock the ratio on that. And you can't go down to 0, but you can go down to 0.1 and then hit enter. So that's our starting point. And enter again. And then what we want to do is we want to zoom. Now, because we want it to spring, we want to zoom it higher than 100% and have it bounce back to beneath 100% and then up again and then down again, and just generally gradually to settle at 100%. So I'm going to take it up to here. You can increase your spacing here so you can see what's going on a bit more clearly. So we're going to have that zoom in over, let's say zoom in over about 10 frames. Okay, I'm going to transform it, Control T, and you can see it's at 0.1, so let's take it up to 110%. Enter, and you see it's created the frame for us. Move along a couple of frames, scale, Control T, and then we want to take it down to 90 because it's going to spring back. Make sure we've got it locked. Create another one. Then we're going to go back up to 105. So we're just gradually getting closer to 100%. And then we're going to take it 95. And then take it to 103. Oh, 103. Oh, see, I forgot to lock it there. And then eventually to settle at 100%. Okay, so you see it's made all these keyframes. So I'll just play that back. You can see it springs in. Okay. You may just want to give it a little extra space to settle down at the end. Move frames around as you see fit. We'll just remove that frame. To delete a frame, just select it, delete. I think we're just going to take that to 100 there. 95, 100. Let's see what that looks like. And experiment with things, you know. There you go. Okay, so that's animating the scale of an object, right? So we've got that popped in. Now we want to do something with the text. So the reason we've got text on different layers is because we want to do a different thing. So it's just to show you what you can animate. So to begin with, let's animate the opacity of the my layer. So my up here, and we just want it to start at 0 opacity. And over, I don't know, 3 frames, 4 frames, is entirely up to you. Have the opacity fade in. Okay. As simple as that. You can see it's made the keyframes for us. Just play and check it, and you'll see. There we are. That fades in like that. Okay. Taking us up to this point, so let's move what we'll have with lovely. So transform text does automatically have transform on it, which is useful. So that can be a scale, as we discussed just now. Styles we'll look at later. Opacity. But so we're just going to do transform. So our starting position for the text, we want that off screen. We just slide that across, and then over a period of frames, we'll have that move in to where it was, roughly. There we go. And again, it's made the keyframe. Okay. Now, with the banner, we want it to work a little bit like it's being typed out. This is a little bit more complicated, but perfectly feasible. So we go and find our banner layer. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create a mask so it just reveals the text one letter per frame. So we click this button here to create a mask, just down here. Okay, and then we're going to click it again to create a vector mask, which is what we're going to animate. Okay, so that's your vector mask, that's your standard mask. So we can delete that bit, right click on it, delete, make sure you're deleting the right one. Okay, and here we have our vector mask, and you can see down in properties, that is a vector mask now by clicking that on there. Okay. So then we need to draw a vector mask up to the pen tool, and it's as simple as drawing a box around it like that, then going to our move tool, and you'll see as I move that out it becomes invisible. If I just nudge it in, you can see what's happening. Okay, so we're going to animate the vector mask position. So start off by clicking there, then we're going to move along one frame, and we're going to tap the vector mask so it reveals the first letter. Now this will not automatically put in a keyframe, so you have to click this little keyframe here to create a keyframe. If you don't do that, nothing will animate. So you can see it moves like that. Okay, then on to the next frame. We've got the A, create a keyframe. Then along to the next frame. Nudge it along so the N is visible. Create a keyframe. The next frame. Nudge it along so the next letter. Keyframe. And so on. There we go. And now you can see that as if it's being typed out. Quite useful, quite fun. So, all working like that so far. Now the last thing we want is a clicky button. A button that just sort of wobbles a bit, or just gets your attention as a CTA. So, let's take our layers. Now, we want the text to bounce with the button. So a good thing to do here is select your text and your button. So you've got the rectangle and the clicky button. Right click and convert that to a smart object. Now that puts them both in one layer, which means we can animate the properties of that all together. If you wanted to edit the text, double click on the smart object in there, and you now have a little file that you completely edit to yourself. And if you press save on that, you can see it updates here in the main file. And again, save, and there we go, it updates. So you can close that, you don't need to have it open. That just illustrates what you can do with a smart object. Right, so now we have our clicky as a smart object. All we need to do is transform it very much in the same way as we did with the logo-y type icon. Obviously we don't want it to zoom from 0, so we're going to start it at 100%. And we're just going to click the transform keyframe and go forward. And what we want to do is it just wants to suck in, then bounce out and just wobble and go back to its original 100%. So Control T for transform, remember to lock it. Take it down to 90%, so breathe in, enter, keyframe created, a bit long too. Okay, now we're going to take it to 110 as it zooms out. And we're going to take it to, oh, hang on a sec, I forgot to lock it there, so hang on a sec. Let's go down here, delete that one. Okay, keyframe created. Okay, just give it a little bit of extra frame just a second, and you'll see, there we are. Play that along. And that's bouncing quite quickly, so we probably don't want it to do it that fast. So you can select frames, just open it up a bit. Let's give them any frame each, just there we go. That's a bit better. Okay, and that's pretty much it. You now have the timeline with all the keyframes. You can open them up, see the keyframes, move them around if you need to. And that is basically it. So we've created it, now we need to export it, which is fairly straightforward. Because we have a gradient running through this, this is probably going to cause quite a high file size, which is not something we want. We have to be cautious of that. But let's go and see what it looks like. So, File, Export, Save for Web Legacy. This is going to allow us just to alter settings if we need to of the GIF. Right, straight off the bat you can see that's quite high, 1.4 megabytes. It's not really what we want. We can change that as you alter the patterns of the dots in the GIF. You'll see that the file size changes. Now it's gone up massively to 2.26, which is definitely not what we want. Let's go on to Fusion. Okay, colours, you can alter the quantity of colours in it. Obviously there aren't many colours, essentially there are only two, but it's converting the aliasing with all these greys and the gradient. So you can take it down to 64, that will bring the file size down. It's worth thinking about sometimes. If you want to look through the animation as you're doing it, you can just see, so lower colours is causing some banding in the gradient there, which, if it's moving fast enough may not be an issue, but you have to make your own call on that. And that won't necessarily run at real time either, just so if it looks like it's running slowly. So anyway, let's take it up to 256, save to the desktop, banner GIF. Okay. Now that was quite large, so let's try it by turning off the gradient layer and seeing if that reduces the file size, which it has done massively. You can see it's now gone from megabytes to 62.5k, which is fantastic. So do be wary of gradients, things with photographs in them. They can increase the file size quite substantially if they're moving. If they're static, it's not so bad. And let me just hit save on that. Let's call it banner 2. And there we go. Just save your file if you need to come back and edit it. And then you have it. And there's the one with the gradient. I hope that helps. Okay, thanks. Bye.